So we'll start in 3, 2, 1 now. Yes. Thanks and welcome. Hi Patrick. Great you could join for this session where we'll talk about DevOps for process integration or process orchestration. So in the course of this, I will be using SAP PI, and obviously I do mean SAP process integration and process orchestration, because for the purpose of these things, it is anyway the same concepts, same things that they can do. So I'll be using them, interchangeably. But when it is the process integration part that I'm referring to, the part about transferring messages, not about all the other services that they exist in a PI world or process orchestration world, like BPM rules. I think those are smaller things in the SAP ecosystems, and we don't really have a good way to handle those anyway. Good, but let me get you here and let's get started. So these are some of the things that we want to be covering today. A little about Figma, how to handle PI PO DevOps in a better way. We'll talk about show you some demos, and then we'll look at some of the other improvements that we make, and there should be time for Q&A. If you have questions along the way, put them into the chat or into the Q&A, then we'll try to go through those at some point in the presentation. And obviously we're making this as a way to give you some more insight about what's going on, and for that, your input questions is really important for us to understand what you want for it. So who's Figma? So we are a tool or company that creates tools to automate SAP integration. So for about 6 years ago, I found an idea on how to simplify PI testing, and we created a tool that could simplify the testing of PI. And then we found out that if we needed to do that, we also needed to have a DevOps process in place and understand what was going on with your full landscape. And once we had that, it was much easier also to say, okay, let's just control the full PI transport delivery process. In May last year, we wanted SAP's Hack to build a tool to handle PI to CPI migrations, and that is a tool that leverages a lot of the services that we already built for the PI and the CPI migration part of the tool. So, and I think here I'll just also put in the poll. So how many integrations do you currently have in your PI system? And I think this is quite an important question, because obviously we do have a lot of these scenarios, and as if we look at SAP's communication, obviously cloud integration is the preferred platform for doing any kind of integration. And that is important, but obviously there is a number of limitations in this. So this A2A scenarios, it's because you're on premise, it's B2B scenarios. There is some limitations also on governance and reusability that's not as good in the CPI. So this week there came a new improvement on it that made some of the processing better, and that you could share scripts in a CPI world better. But there's also some part about monitoring, and I think one of the biggest improvements that we got for granted in a PI world was exactly once in order. If you want to achieve the same thing in a CPI world, then it is a lot more complicated to set up. And I think if you have above 300 integration, 500 integration, cloud integration is probably not the preferred tool for you at the moment. But I see here that quite a few people, like half, have below 300 integrations and more have above 300 integration. Or half have 300 integration and the other half have above 300 integration. So, and obviously it depends on the roadmap, what you're looking for, how long time you're going to be using the PI tooling, and how much is going on in the platform. But these are the two options where this starts to make sense. But yeah, for smaller scenarios, yeah, maybe a less than 100 CPI may be a way forward. And then obviously that is sliding, and I think definitely you would want to start with some kind of migration understanding, or at least development in the new landscape, what you want to achieve for this. So yeah, if you just joined, if you have any questions along the way, just put them into the chat or into the QA, and thanks for joining. So the thing I want to talk about is one of the improvements we made last year, and we're working with a global client that we're working on an S4 project, where they're aligning the S4 system, creating a new system that they obviously wanted to be able to use for the duration of the project, and being able to rename a lot of these things. So they had some new systems names that needed to be configured for all scenarios, and that was normally held to configure manually, and the way they have normally had been doing these kind of governance was the manual Excel or Word way, where you would create a Word or Excel document that you would then submit for someone else to apply. It was, we wanted also to automate the configuration of channels during import. They had a requirement to switch sender and receivers during the import, so they could rename from ERP system 1 to ERP system 2 on the same system, both receivers and senders, to make specific scenarios a lot easier. They had a large number of ICOs with a lot of receivers in, with a lot of different rules, and it was not all of these different rules that needed to be applied at the same time, or transported at the same time. So they may have long-running processes that they did not want to transport along the way. So how do we handle this? Can we actually say we do not want to transport these things? Then they wanted, a way to roll back transport. So if they had done a transport, they would like to say, okay, let's roll back this transport and start over. And then we talked about also creating a tool to automate partner creation. So if they had new AS2 partners, they could easily, with an API call with these 5 different objects that normally are changing each time you do a partner, like partner name, AS2 identifiers, own AS2 identifiers possibly, UL, and if it's synchron or asynchron, MDN, create all the artifacts that were needed as a part of this, and then start processing it. So then I hope that it's some of the same challenges that you are looking at, and obviously you may just have 1 or 2 of these challenges, but I definitely think that a lot of companies have this thing about sending some kind of an Excel document to basis or whoever's in charge of configuration, and that is a huge time consumption part where you can save a lot of time with automation. So it's like an all-in-one tool that have all of these configurations objects. That means that once you have actually done all your development on the development system, you do not need to use the SAP GUI for the rest of the transport or processing, because everything can be handled with the Figma tool. And we can obviously test all the changes that are happening, and we have time to also handle approval of with the context information. So an architect can approve all the changes a lot easier than normally. So previously we had, the way we had defined transport was just one long string from dev, queue, test, pre-prod, and production. And that meant if you went into your pre-prod, found a problem, you needed to transport the full iFlow again. We instead made it up of a lump of different scenarios. So as you can see here, we can transport from dev to queue, from queue to P, or pre-prod. And each of this is a different transport where you have different way of handling the configurations. And then because we needed to have this renaming of objects, we also have actually transport on the same systems, but we'll get to that later. So yes, when you're defining the landscape, they are grouped together, so the system know which are the systems that are after or before in this landscape. And then you can set up mapping of systems in this, so the system would know that if you have this business component or business system, then it translates to another business system in the new system. And you have option to set up replacement of host names, so backend host names that you know would always be different between the different systems. So we just create a list of these changes, add them to the transport, and then each time you transport, you don't need to remember what is the ERP host that we need to connect to here. So that's the landscape. In communication channels, I think that's also one of the biggest places where you need to do a lot of configurations. Here you have a lot better understanding about what is going to be changed. You have the ability to make search replacements after file name, host names, and yeah, make sure that you fill in passwords in the system. And then once you have done all the configuration, you can send it to approval, and if there's any problems, you can get it back. But the person that can approve it would actually have all the capabilities to see what is going on, and then being able to approve these things in a simple way. And obviously, normally you cannot configure your own or approve your own transports because of SOX requirements. And I think that's also best practice. No one should be able to transport anything into production themselves without someone else have given a second thought on it. In my demo, I do have that access, otherwise it just takes a lot longer to go through these things. We also added tagging, which makes it a lot easier for you to understand who owns a given scenario, which business system is involved, or project team, etc. Is this a sales problem or a sales scenario? So if you have any specific requirements, you can go that way and figure out who owns that given component. And then we have the rollback. We'll see that you can create an object, roll it back if there's any problems on it, and you will, yeah, it will be like that change had never happened. And now that is obviously important. If you make rolls, deploy something to production that does not work, then you can always roll it back. So now I want to show you all of this thing about how we can actually transport an object, an ICO with all the objects from one system to another, configure all transport, configure all objects, and then show you the documentation that is created for this. So that's demo time. And I guess that's Hope that is what you are looking for, to see this in action. And comments along the way, questions, put them into the chat so I can see it. So here we have the Figma system. It is a standalone Java application. You can obviously deploy it where you want. I think that's probably the wrong place to place me there. So most would have it on a server in the data center or Azure cloud, etc. We do have an option to run it on BTP, but if you want to connect it and use the DevOps for PI, we are currently not able to support that at the moment. So maybe that will come at a later time. But the idea here is that this system will then connect to your PI system, download all the artifacts that is a part of this. And what you can actually see here is I made a small change to one of my icons. Click on the right screen. And here we can see this icon. We can see all the linked object that it has beneath it. And if we click at versions, we have option to compare versions here. And we have that for all artifacts. We can see what was changed on a given system, because starting from the test tool, we have a good XML comparison option here. So here we can see which system has been changed as a part of this. So now we have an icon. We have made a change to it, and now we want to transport it into our test system so we can handle the processing there. And what I'll do is I will create a demo. We'll just create a naming for it. We can select which systems you want to do. We have from dev to dev, and we also have from dev to T, which is our new binary approach. And we will then link it with our Jira ServiceNow incident. And obviously, these are just links that, soft links. So it means that if you are on a ticket and you see an object, it is easy for you to go to Jira and understand why someone have made or requested that change. And if you do not have that, it is obviously a problem if you do not have any changes to it. And here we can see there's a tag on this, which is the multi-center project. So what I can do now is I can detach all the dependent objects for this. So here I get all the different components, and I know that there's one here in the SAP basis that I do not want, so I just detach that. And there's also an iDoc here I don't want. It really does not matter, because this is just once you do the transport of these objects that you can see these things. Next up is we can look up if we have any test cases for this scenario. And see here if I have this. So here we have 9 test cases. We can take one of these, and we can then run it on the system in the landscape to see how this works. Does it work as we would expect it to do? And the way we're testing is just like the PIT tool. We're taking messages, sending them through the system, and then we're picking out the response, and we'll see if it behaves as expected. And we can see here the testing results. We can see everything compared successfully. If we look at the payloads, we can see the different diffs that have been applied at a given point in time. So we're satisfied that the change did not affect our test case. If it had, we also had an option to go in and say, okay, now we know this is the new place, the new way that we want the content to be like, and that would be pretty simple also to do. So now we can start the transport of these objects, and if we had more software components into it, we will create one transport for each software component. And one of the things you will see here is that we will create one repository or ESR component, and this is a file export that the system will do for it. And then it also create a directory objects for these things. And here we have an option to go in and do comparison. We can go and compare specific object, which changes have occurred, what is going on in it. But I don't think we have any changes here, so we can just say approve. And since I also have an option to approve, I can approve it, give a good reason to improve it. And the same, so for the ESR, here we have some more components and some more abilities to handle transports. And here we have, oh, that's not what I wanted to do first. We have a component here under the async partner 2. And here we have set up the mapping of this B2B partner is called B2B demo. Let's call it demo 4 for this. So that means we can actually on all levels go in and rename objects, and then that would actually apply to the full chain of objects. So for the ICO communication channels, etc. So now we've made a modification for that one. We can look at the communication channel that we have defined here. So here we can see that it has already configured the service to a new name. We could also change, configure the channel if we wanted to put in a description. And so here we have a number of improvements to understand what is actually being changed here. So we can say changed values. We can see someone else already entered a password. We can see here that we just made a change to the user, and this value out here has been replaced globally by this value. So, and what we can see here, it says inherit from source. That means that it is the source value that decides this. So this is something we have defined on the landscape level. So if we go back here and say save, say it's okay, we can actually go here to the landscape. Here we have the landscape definition, who are the approvers of this landscape, naming of these objects, what are the successors, and here we have defined this setting to replace a host name with another host name, and then it just do a full search replaced inside of this this object to handle these things. So now I can send it to approval, and I can approve it. Or if I reject it, then the full transport will go back to start, and you can start doing the transport again. So now I can import it. So first the ESR, and we will also do the repository at the same time. And you can also call this with APIs. So you have options to, for instance, connect it to a CTS Plus environment for your ABAP system, and then once that has been imported, call out to the Figma system and say, okay, also import the ticket for the system on this given landscape. So now we can see everything has been connected correctly. We have here a rollback option if you wanted to do rollback here. And we can see the different scenarios. Some objects were not changed because they already existed, so we do not need to make changes there already. So now we have imported into our QA system. We would obviously do our testing and everything else here, and then we can just click here, create a new ticket, to create a ticket with the same object from our test to our pre-prod or production system, and then you will repeat the process again with these things. And they would be linked together. I could also roll back here, but now I just want to say, okay, now this transport is resolved. We have done everything we needed to do. For this, we have a report here that will give us the different scenarios that is a part of this. So we have documentation about what was going on here. We can see all the objects that were part of this transport, which test cases did we run, what were the result of this test, and here we have all the objects that were imported, by who, and who approved it. So we have all of this information. If we go back, so here we can now look at the test system, T75 system, and here we can see that we have added this new ICO. We can see it has the tags, but what we can see here is that it actually have a link to the ticket that we created, and that means we can actually go from our system, or from any change or any object, we can go in and we can see what was the reason for us to create this this change. And that gives you really a powerful audit trail that if someone asks, you can always say, well, let's go here and check out what this this all looks like. So that's the process that allow you to handle documentation. And the last thing I just wanted to show you was, if we are on an ICO, we also have scenario documentation here that will create a Word document with version history, what were the changes on this specific object. So you have a lot more understanding about what is going on in your landscape, what are the receivers, etc. So this gives you a lot more insight about what is going on in transport. And as you saw, everything is handled from the Figma tool, and you do not need to go into the PI to do any transport after you have done the import. Any questions, comments along the way here? Okay. Yes. We will continue. So, yeah, we did not go into this, but we also have it on an ICO level. So if you have receivers or interfaces, we have this thing called projection, where we can go in and say, do not transport the specific receiver. So it's just exclude or ignore options you have here of these scenarios. And yeah, this is really important if you have huge scenarios that you do not want to go live with the same time. And yeah, the challenge here was the customer had a lot in development. They made some changes and started handling the transports, and once they've done it there, it was complicated to get it, they would need to maintain the ICOs manually. If you do it with this, you can have it all within the tool and not make any modifications to different rules, conditions as you progress. We also have it in the same system, and this is really useful if you, for instance, have an ERP system that changes name. And to do that, we go back to our development system. We will use the same ICO. Let's see if I can find it here. Otherwise, you obviously can just search for it, search for ICOs, etc. So there's a lot of options for searching for these different artifacts. So we'll assign it to a new ticket. Same system. We will configure landscape, and so this will just be dev to dev. Assign it, copy it, and we will attach all dependent objects. So in here I've set up that I do not want to deny all. So I've set up denying rules. That means that we are not transporting these with the object, and there's a lot of options for setting up different denying rules by priority systems, tags, etc. But obviously we cannot transport ICOs, or repository object on the same system. Now I can start the transport, so that's the same process. So I open the system here, and then I want to change the ERP system. So this is this component here. I simply just go in and say, now I had done an example before, it was 300, so let's do 420. And if we press save here, now we can see, if we look at the ICO here, or the channel here on the ERP system, we can see it is also being mapped to this new system. And the same for the ICO. If we look at the ICO here, we have the settings in here where you would be able to include or exclude different scenario if you wanted to. I send it to approval. Approve it. And yeah, here you can also configure it with communication channels, as you saw before, and then import. The process, so it will first import it, and then it will register all the objects. So let's see here, now it is in the system, and what it means is we can go here, we can do a reload. Does it pop up on the different screen? So now we can see we have created a new object here with the new system, and everything else is configured the same way as we had for the original one. And that means also now it's successful if we say we do not want this. So we can see a lot of these objects were skipped because they're already there. But we did add these things to it, so we can select rollback. And that means that if I go to my CPI agent here and close here and open it, we will I get a warning here saying, hey, this does not exist anymore. So that's how easy the rollback functionality is, that you have all of this power to handle the scenario. So now we can see it's gone also here. So that's the transport. Demo, we showed that one. So yeah, this will give you a better governance path. You have the option to see everything has been linked and know that no one is going in without permission to make modifications. You have this connection with Jira, ServiceNow, or whatever versioning system you have. We have the testing as a part of this, and then it's a lot easier to figure out which changes exist in the system because we have the version comparison going on here. And obviously you will ask, so we already have Charm, CTS Plus, so how is this different? But I guess you can see, yes, Charm is good, or CTS Plus, it helps us transport, but you still have all of these manual processes. You still need to go in for each communication channel and figure out what you need to do for that specific communication channel. It's not possible to compare objects, so once you're doing the import or before, you don't really know if the developer have done the right job, what's going on with the version, the objects, and you still have to do a lot of manual work to configure these things. And after, yeah, it's a manual job to configure these things automatically. So all of this is the automated part that this tool brings to the delivery process. So we also had as a part of an extension of it or a separate app, we create a tool that where you given 5 scenarios or 5 parameters or whatever was that, could, based on the number of templates, create a full AS2 partner setup for a specific scenario. So it can create all the different artifacts for a scenario, and you then easily be able to go in and replace these 5 parameters. And obviously once you've done this and called it, it gets into the normal Figma approval process. So you create it in QA, and then you will create the transport from QA to production, and all of that is handled automatically. So you do not need to be involved that much in it, and that's also something that saves quite a bit of time if you have a lot of AS2 or other types of partner setups that you need to do at a regular basis. Testing, we obviously come from a testing tool, so we do have a good way of doing testing, where you can select an ICO and say, okay, from this ICO I want to create a test case. And based on that, it is really simple to start testing with that. So it works much like the PIT tool, or the PIT tool works like our tool. But we do have a number of advantages. We do support testing of EDI messages, so it compares the EDI message instead of the XML message, because we are looking into the modules. There's a lot of other areas where it differs. You can see here it has a good way to compare it, create test cases, and it is really fast to create test cases. And but I also want to make time for questions. I think that's the value of this scenario. So if you want to see more on the testing, we can go through that in the Q&A section. But I think that some of the values you would see here is it really simplifies the way you're delivering integration, speeds up the process, lower the cost of integration or deployment, improve the governance. And even though I guess a lot of you guys are filling in these templates, we know that these are not really, will not really reflect what is in the system. And it's some of the boring parts of the operation part. And I think this is something that will make you a lot happier, because you can just focus on the interesting part, not about going in and configure these things at odd hours. So we also have the same capability, if not more complicated, for cloud integration, API management, where we have testing, transport, and we obviously have the PI to CPI migration, where in this release we are adding a cockpit to show you how your migration is going. Let me just show this one to you, because this is brand new and I really like it. So here we can see our list of ICOs we have. So we can see all the different ones we have on the systems, and we actually have multiple systems involved here. What we can then do is we can click on one, we can create the migration from here, preview, migrate, and all of this is happening from inside of the tool. And there's obviously a few more steps I would need to perform here. So here we can see everything that goes on, and we can also see if we have test cases or these are in production. So this is really a powerful one for showing or handling the migrations. So yes, if you want to look at the business case, and I think one thing just before we do that is I have a QA polls here. So how much time do we actually spend on each transport that you're making. So that includes creating documentation, creating approval, sending this for someone to approve, for that someone to go through what you have done, see if all the documents that you have filled in are correct, understanding what is going on, importing it to QA with a different team member, and handling the configuration. So there's something that can involve a lot of people, and yeah. So just 2 seconds more. But yeah, there's a good overweight of the 5 to 10 hours for each transport, and I think that is also in line with my current estimates. And obviously it does depend a lot of what your current scenarios are, who are your pharmaceutical company or something like that have specific extra requirements for governance, transport, documentation, and obviously sometimes you would, and so we sort of saw that as a client, I would assume they had some tools to create this documentation automatically. Otherwise they have spent a lot of money on those kind of documentations. But the way with Figma tool, as you can see, it automates all of these processes. So if you look at, you each month have just 10 transports and spend 6 hours on it, and I guess based on the survey that's not unrealistic. 70 euros an hour times 12 months, that is about 50,000 euros a year. And that is just on the time saving. Then there's a number of other things. It's about solving integration faster. You can release transports a lot faster. It's about fewer errors and faster resolution of those errors that finally exist. And then also it's about easier to train employees, consultants. I definitely remember a lot of times when I've been involved in some scenarios and I needed to understand how do they actually want me to document these things, what's the different parts that need to be involved in this. And then I guess you get some happier developers because you don't need to spend all the time on documentation, but can spend it on what really matters. The Figma tool starts at 15,000 euros a year for PI scenarios. And that gives you all the capabilities as we saw here. Transport, governance, documentation, testing. We also have a bit of monitoring capabilities for these things. Some implementation. I think in a cloud integration world, the tool is a lot simpler and the requirements is a lot simpler. In a PI, you probably have a little more complicated scenarios that you want to be able to support. So let's have a meeting to understand how you can get it started. You can run an evaluation on your laptop or a spare server. It is really simple to set up, to get started with it, and then you can roll it out to your landscape and set it up. Obviously how long time it takes depends on your organization, but we have seen companies that have been able to be productive in less than a month, and also some that has taken a bit longer for getting installed, being able to run, configure, and set up all the different scenarios that you need for running the system. So if you find this interesting, let's schedule a call with your team, your management, and understand what the use case for you would be, and then let's find a plan on how to optimize this. You can go to figaf.com/book and book a session with me where we can talk about how this can be done, what's possible. Then the next one is, and you can also try it out yourself. There is yeah, as I said, it is pretty easy to install it. It is simply to download the file, run it with your Java installation, connect to your PI systems, download all the content, and it does that automatically. And then you can actually set up transport and start configuring this yourself. You can also work together with me, and we can set a good demo up in like 2 hours. 1 to 2 hours should normally be fine to set up a PI scenario. And that leaves us for time for Q&A. So if you have questions, something you want me to cover, then let's have a chat on those things, because I think that is the important part of it. There's obviously a lot of things that I could show you, but I want to know what is most interesting for you to see in this process.